On February 28, 2026, the silence of the Persian Gulf was shattered by 900 missiles in 12 hours. Operation Epic Fury achieved what decades of diplomacy could not: the decapitation of the Iranian leadership and the dismantling of its nuclear core. But as the smoke cleared over Fordo, a new, more dangerous front was opening, not in the deserts of the Middle East, but within the fragile infrastructure and fractured politics of the United States. Kinetic victory is one thing. Domestic survival is another. In the early hours of February 28, 2026, the world woke to a Middle East that had been irrevocably altered. Operation Epic Fury, a joint U.S. Israeli campaign, did more than just target bunkers. It aimed for the heart of the Islamic Republic. Within the first hour, reports confirmed the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. By the end of the day, the International Atomic Energy Agency would later suggest that the centrifuges at Fordow were no longer operational. To the tactical planners in the Pentagon, it looked like a perfect strike. Iran's navy was 90% neutralized in a week. Its missile launch capacity dropped by 90% almost instantly. On paper, the war was won before the first day was over. Pause for effect. But in the era of hybrid warfare, the battlefield is a three-dimensional chessboard, where the most vulnerable pieces are often thousands of miles away from the front line. As the Trump administration declared a decisive victory, the Iranian response was already flowing through fiber optic cables and global shipping lanes. They didn't need to win a naval battle to bring the United States to a standstill. They only needed to weaponize the geography of the Strait of Hormuz and the vulnerabilities of the American digital grid. This is the briefing on the war after the war, the one being fought in our gas stations, our water treatment plants, and the halls of a deeply divided Congress. The most immediate casualty of Epic Fury was the global economy. By March 4th, the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most vital energy artery, was effectively closed. Iran didn't need a standing navy to do this. They used a combination of sea mines, drone swarms, and the simple withdrawal of maritime insurance. 20% of the world's petroleum supply vanished overnight. We saw the results in real time. Brent crude, which sat comfortably at $75 in January, crested $170 by early April. In the United States, the impact hit like a physical blow. Despite the administration's attempts to paint the war as a success, consumers were met with what economists call the largest energy shock in history. In California, fuel rationing became a reality as supply chains from the Gulf were severed. But the pain wasn't just at the pump. Amazon added fuel surcharges, mortgage rates hit 7-month highs. The price of basic detergents and soda bottles began to climb as petroleum-based plastics and shipping costs skyrocketed. This is where the tactical success of a missile strike meets the brutal reality of a globalized economy. You cannot bomb a country that sits on a global choke point without feeling the heat in your own kitchen. The International Energy Agency warned that if the closure persisted for 6 months, the global economy would lose 13 million barrels of oil every single day, triggering a recession that would dwarf the 2008 financial crisis. For the American voter, the decisive victory in Tehran felt a lot like a financial surrender at home. While the kinetic war stayed largely in the Middle East, the shadow war came directly to the American doorstep. On April 7, 2026, CISA and the FBI issued an urgent advisory. Iranian-affiliated actors, specifically the group known as cyberattacks, began a sustained campaign against U.S. critical infrastructure. They didn't go for the high-profile targets like the Pentagon. They went for the soft underbelly, the programmable logic controllers, or PLCs, that manage our water and energy systems. In several municipalities, water treatment facilities reported unauthorized access. In one instance, the EPA had to step in as systems were manipulated to introduce contaminants or disrupt filtration. This wasn't about a catastrophic failure, but about community resilience. The goal was psychological: to make the American public feel that their government could reach across the world to kill a supreme leader, but couldn't keep their local tap water safe. Pause for effect. This is the essence of Iranian asymmetric strategy. By exploiting decades-old vulnerabilities in our industrial automation, they turned the domestic home front into a combat zone. Hospitals, local governments, and energy utilities found themselves under a siege that had no clear end date. Even as a fragile ceasefire was discussed in Islamabad, the cyber intrusions continued. The message was clear: Iran may have lost its nuclear facilities, but it has gained persistent access to the systems that keep American life running. For an intelligence analyst, this is the most sobering reality of 2026. Our backyard was wide open while our eyes were focused on the horizon. The physical and economic shocks of the war acted as a catalyst for a pre-existing condition: American political polarization. By late March 2026, the domestic consensus on the war had fractured along predictable, yet deeper, lines. A Pew Research poll conducted in the heat of the conflict found that while 71% of Republicans supported the decision to strike Iran, a staggering 88% of Democrats called it the wrong decision. This isn't just partisan bickering. It is a fundamental disagreement on the definition of national security. The administration framed the war as a restoration of deterrence, a necessary move to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran from holding the world hostage. But to the opposition, and a growing segment of the youth, only 58% of Republicans under 50 supported the move. It was an unauthorized and illegal escalation that traded long-term stability for a short-term headline. The legal community joined the fray, with the New York City Bar Association condemning the use of force as a violation of the War Powers Act and the U.S. Constitution. This internal friction is exactly what Tehran's information operations sought to exploit. By targeting U.S. bases in the Gulf, causing an estimated $5.6 billion in damage, Iran provided the imagery needed to fuel the narrative of a quagmire. When the Pentagon asked for an additional $200 billion to sustain operations, the fiscal conservative wing of the GOP and the progressive wing of the Democratic Party found themselves in an unlikely and uncomfortable alignment against endless war. In the shadow of the 2026 midterms, the war in Iran became the primary lens through which the American voter viewed the legitimacy of their own institutions. The strategic paradox of 2026 is that the United States is militarily more dominant than ever, yet strategically more constrained. We have burned through our stockpiles of Tomahawk missiles and Patriot interceptors at a rate that has left our theaters in Europe and Asia dangerously thin. While we have dismantled the IRGC's top tier, we have also inadvertently unified the axis of resistance. Hezbollah, the Houthis, and various Shia militias in Iraq have transitioned from being proxies to being a decentralized, self-sustaining network of grievance. They no longer need a central command in Tehran to conduct operations. And as the United States looks toward a post-conflict Middle East, it finds itself more isolated. Traditional allies in the Gulf, like the UAE and Qatar, who saw their own energy infrastructure hit by Iranian retaliatory strikes, are beginning to question the protection provided by the American security umbrella. If the U.S. Navy, the most powerful force in history, could not keep the Strait of Hormuz open for 5 weeks, what is the value of the alliance? This is the humiliation of a brutal victory that social and political analysts are now debating. We won the kinetic exchange, but we revealed a naval impotence in the face of asymmetric geography. We achieved regime decapitation, but we may have triggered a regional security vacuum that China and Russia are all too eager to fill. The war in Iran has proven that the American home front is now a central constraint on our ability to project power. If the public won't support the cost and the infrastructure can't survive the retaliation, can the U.S. really afford to win another war like this? As of April 30th, 2026, we are in a period of armed peace. The ceasefire holds, but the scars are fresh. The 2026 Iran war will not be remembered for its brilliant air campaign or its technological marvels. It will be remembered as the moment the American public realized that foreign policy is domestic policy. Every missile launched in the Gulf has a price tag that is paid in inflation, cyber vulnerability, and social cohesion. We are learning that in the 21st century, victory is a relative term. You can destroy the enemy's nuclear program, you can eliminate their leaders, and you can sink their fleet. But if you lose the trust of your own people and the security of your own power grid in the process, who really won the game? The move was checkmate on the board in Tehran, but the question remains, was it worth the sacrifice of the king at home? For the United States, the real battle for stability is only just beginning. It's a battle of policy, of infrastructure, and ultimately of national identity. This has been a briefing on the State of the Union, viewed through the lens of a war that changed everything, yet settled nothing.